let's talk about Egyptomania. What is it? If you don't know me, I'm Hannah Delaney. I'm a Gothic mystery author, and the 19th and 20th century are two of my specialisms. Let's talk about Egyptomania. So what is it? As you'll see behind me, there are a famous couple who you might recognise from the 1999 film The Mummy. There they are again. Aren't they gorgeous? But The Mummy is the image I wanted to use because, for me, that just highlights what Egyptomania is. So Egyptomania in general is a fascination with the ancient civilization of Egypt, and it's not a modern phenomenon. I think a lot of people think of Egyptology and Egyptomania as something that happened in the 19th century when the French and the British started exploring Egypt and bringing back artifacts. But it was much older than that. So Egyptomania actually started with the Greeks and the Romans, and they had a fascination with ancient Egypt. You have to bear in mind how old Egypt is. It impressed the ancient Greeks. It's that old. So we're starting in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, obsession with all these pharaohs, all these treasures, all this architecture, and how Egypt was one of the first civilizations in the world. There's possibly only 2 or 3 older than Egypt, but Egypt's definitely there. It's in the top 3. It's one of the oldest civilizations. So why Egypt in particular? Why not Mesopotamia, for example? Egypt, as it's thought to be one of the very first civilizations in the world, it's fascinated the Western world, and by the Western world I mostly mean Europe, but obviously as America became more of a country, it interested the Americans as well in the 19th century. So what we were obsessed with in particular was the mysticism, and you know, you've got to think about how old this kingdom was. Like, Egypt was so old. It was older than even Jesus, okay? So imagine these Christians who are like, oh yeah, God created the world, and then there was the Bible, and then it's like, oh no. Egypt were here a long time before even Jesus was born. Like, it's so old, people are still digging up parts of ancient Egypt and it's undiscovered, and they're like, oh, actually the kingdom might have got going a bit earlier than we thought because we found yet another mummy. So Egypt and Egyptomania, it was particularly captivating for the West because, you know, if you think about a really Christian society, and also as we get into the 18th century and the 19th century, everything's about science and reason, and then all of a sudden we've got ancient Egypt and it's like, oh, magical supernatural goings on, mummies, curses, vengeful spirits, haunted artifacts, Egyptian treasures. We've got this key to a world that is very different from our own. And with that, we also have the European imagination coming up with Egyptian-themed horror. So let's give you a quick timeline of what was happening in Egypt and why it influences Egyptomania today. So in 31 BC, Queen Cleopatra, yes, that one, think of Elizabeth Taylor in the 20th century, Queen Cleopatra, who everyone is still talking about, dies in 31 BC, and the Romans conquer Egypt. They wanted it for a long time, they've got it now. 642 AD, Roman occupation ends, okay? So the Romans, their empire falls apart, and then it's passed from pillar to post by several Eastern empires. So these are empires in the Middle East and Southern Europe. So 18th century, Egypt is just some agricultural leg of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans aren't really that interested in the treasures and the architecture and so on. They're just like, look, we've got an empire to rule. Can you just make us some cotton and some grain and just do your jobs, please? It's not until Napoleon brings the French army to Egypt in 1798 that the real fascination with Egypt is revived, because don't forget I said that the Greeks and Romans were very interested in ancient Egyptian civilization. Now they've long gone at this point. This is centuries later, and we've got Europeans now in the 18th and 19th century who have discovered ancient Egypt. So 1798, Napoleon brings his army. 1799, French troops find the Rosetta Stone. Yes, that one. 1822, Jean-Francois Champollion translates hieroglyphs using the Rosetta Stone. And that is it. The Europeans are interested. The Europeans are invested. Egypt will never be the same again. But I do warn you, as well as a genuine interest and a genuine fascination with ancient Egypt, we also had a dark side. So at this point, Egypt is flip-flopping between powers, and it has been for centuries at this point. But with the French and the British and then the Ottomans as well, Egypt's just caught in the crossfire. And as any war-torn country will experience, you know, they have to do what they can to make ends meet. So the locals get involved in mummy mania. So what is this? Mummy mania is the interest of the French and European powers, and also with that comes the interest from aristocrats. They're like, oh, what artifacts can we bring home with us, back to our parlour rooms, back to our museums? And unfortunately, some of the mummies that they brought back with them, some might have been ancient, and then those ones went to museums, or they might have been undressed in medical schools so they could learn about how diseases worked and what kind of illnesses the Egyptians suffered from and how they were mummified. These were all for scientific reasons, but also there were some bodies that ended up coming back with Europeans, and those bodies were not ancient bodies at all. They were probably from the local cemetery. You could pick mummies up from the local street corner. Like I said, Egyptomania has a dark side, but as well as kind of legit archaeological excavations going on at the time, there was a frenzy of superstition to do with ancient Egypt and the mummy's curse. So all through the 19th century, we've got a lot of Gothic fiction. We've got a lot of emphasis on letting the dead rest, leave them where they are. We've got uncanny behaviours. We've got paranormal activity. And this is all attributed to the idea of the Europeans stealing treasures from this ancient world, this ancient civilization that they don't understand. One of the most high-profile cases was actually in the 20th century with King Tutankhamun. You will be familiar because it's one of the most famous excavations because his tomb had not been raided. So bear in mind what I said about back when Egypt was passed from pillar to post, several different empires from the east took control of Egypt, and then we also had tomb raiding going on for centuries. So by the time people were excavating tombs in the 17th and 18th, 19th centuries, there wasn't a lot left. But with King Tutankhamun's tomb, the whole thing was there, okay? So the discovery of his tomb, it caused a media frenzy. So not only was this the first time that a well-preserved tomb had been found, but strange things happened afterwards. Everybody who had been involved in the unearthing of King Tutankhamun's grave died or got ill in mysterious circumstances. You may be familiar with King Tut's curse. So the alleged victims included Prince Ali Kamal Fahi Bey of Egypt. He was shot dead by his wife in 1923. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who supposedly x-rayed the mummy, he died mysteriously in 1924. Sir Lee Stack, the Governor General of Sudan, who was assassinated in Cairo in 1924. Arthur Mace of Carter's excavation team said to have died of arsenic poisoning in 1928. And then Carter's secretary, Richard Bethel, also died, smothered in his bed. And of course, there was Carter's own father, who died by suicide in 1930. I mean, the media went mad for this. So we've already got this kind of positive fascination with ancient Egypt, but then the media are like, oh my god, what if all this stuff is actually cursed? What if we've unleashed something terrible on the modern world? And this is what Egyptomania is about, and this is also why Egyptomania is quite gothic.